Have you ever been one mistake away from losing everything? What if your darkest moment became a public spectacle with people you've known your entire life suddenly gathering to watch you die? What if the stones meant to crush your body were already crushing your soul? Imagine standing there, exposed, humiliated, surrounded by faces twisted with disgust and righteous fury. The crowd growing larger by the second, the first stone already lifted. And in that moment, that terrible final moment, you realize a devastating truth. They don't want justice. They want blood, your blood, and they're going to use God's name to justify spilling it. What would you give for someone, anyone, to stand between you and certain death? What would it feel like to look into the eyes of the only person who could save you and see neither condemnation nor disgust, but something else entirely? Welcome to Hidden Heroes of Faith, where ordinary people face extraordinary challenges and God shows up in the most unexpected ways. And today we're diving into one of the most explosive confrontations in Scripture. Dawn broke over Jerusalem, the air still cool, the streets coming alive with vendors setting up for the day. In the temple courts, a crowd had already gathered around the teacher from Nazareth, Jesus, the name that made religious leaders' blood boil and common people's hearts leap with hope. For months, he'd been turning their world upside down, healing on the Sabbath, touching lepers, eating with sinners, claiming authority that only belonged to God. The religious leaders had been watching, waiting, planning. "We need to discredit him publicly," a senior Pharisee had said in a closed meeting days earlier. "Find something that will force him to contradict either Moses or Rome. Then we'll have him." That morning they thought they'd found the perfect trap. She never heard them coming. One moment she was in another man's bed, a forbidden pleasure she knew could cost her everything. The next, the door crashed open. Men burst in, faces twisted with disgust and something else. Satisfaction. "We've got you now," one sneered, yanking her from the bed. "Where is he?" she gasped, looking around for her lover. A cold smile. "He's not our concern. You are." They didn't let her dress properly, just enough to cover herself before dragging her through the streets, announcing her shame to everyone they passed. "Adulteress! Whore! See the sinner caught in the act." With each step toward the temple, the crowd grew larger, hungrier for blood. She stumbled on the rough street, knees scraping stone, but they jerked her back to her feet. "Keep moving. You have a date with justice." But this wasn't about justice. She was just the bait in their trap, and Jesus was the real target. They burst into the temple courts, interrupting his teaching. The religious leaders thrust her forward into the circle where Jesus sat teaching. She fell hard onto the stone pavement, dust clinging to her tear-streaked face. She couldn't look up, couldn't bear to see the disgust in his eyes. "Teacher," one of the scribes called out, false respect dripping from his voice. "This woman was caught in the act of adultery." Another stepped forward. "In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women." A third, eyes locked on Jesus. "What do you say?" The question was like a sword. If Jesus said stone her, he'd violate Roman law, which didn't permit Jews to execute anyone. If he said let her go, he'd contradict Moses, discrediting himself as a religious teacher. Either way, they win. She dies or Jesus falls. The woman kept her eyes fixed on the ground, watching dust swirl in the morning light. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Would it hurt being stoned? How long would it take to die? But Jesus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he bent down and began writing in the dust with his finger. The religious leaders grew impatient. They pressed harder, demanding an answer. Finally, Jesus straightened. His eyes swept over the crowd, seeing not just their faces, but their hearts. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Then calmly he bent down and continued writing in the dust. The woman remained frozen, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the first stone to strike her flesh. But then, something changed, a shift in the atmosphere. The religious leaders were leaving. First the oldest, then the others, one by one. The stones they'd held so eagerly now abandoned on the ground. Soon only Jesus remained with her in the center of the temple court. "Woman," he said, his voice neither harsh nor condemning, "where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she answered, eyes still fixed on the ground. Then came the words that would replay in her mind every day for the rest of her life. "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." For the first time she looked directly at him, into eyes that somehow saw everything about her, not just her sin, but her pain, her fear, her humanity, yet offered no condemnation. In that moment, something broke inside her, not in destruction, but in release, like chains falling away. She had come within heartbeats of a brutal death. She had been exposed, humiliated, used as a pawn in someone else's game. And now inexplicably, she was free, not just spared from death, but offered life, real life, new life. To truly understand this encounter, we need to recognize what was really happening. First, where was the man? Jewish law required both parties in adultery to be punished. His absence reveals this was never about upholding the law. Second, this was a carefully constructed trap. Roman occupation had stripped Jewish authorities of the right to execute. If Jesus said, "Stone her," he'd incite illegal action. If he said, "Let her go," they denounce him as opposing Moses' law. These religious leaders, the supposed moral guardians, were willing to let a woman die just to score points against their rival. Yet Jesus refuses to play by their rules. "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." He upholds the law while forcing each person to confront their own need for mercy. One by one, they walk away, confronted not by Jesus' words but by their own consciences. Here's what Jesus accomplishes. He preserves both justice and mercy. The moral law stands. He acknowledges her sin and calls her to leave it behind. But he refuses to let that law become a weapon of destruction rather than a path to restoration. This confrontation exposes the vast difference between religion as a system of power and control versus faith as a path to transformation and healing. The religious leaders used sacred texts as weapons. Jesus used them as invitations to truth and freedom. They saw sin as an opportunity to condemn. Jesus saw it as an opportunity to transform. They were willing to sacrifice a human life to maintain their authority. Jesus was willing to risk his reputation to save that life. With each step away from the temple, a revolution was happening inside her. Old identities crumbling, new possibilities emerging. The world still saw adulteress, but Jesus had called her woman, restoring her basic human dignity when everyone else had reduced her to her sin. The religious leaders had been ready to kill her body, but she had been dying inside long before they dragged her into the temple. Now she walked away with something more powerful than mere survival. She carried a challenge to become someone new, to build a life on something sturdier than forbidden pleasures or others' approval. She had encountered someone who refused to define her by her worst moment. All of us have played every role in this drama at different times. We've been the accusers, stones in hand, quick to condemn others based on limited information, eager to execute judgment without examining our own hearts. We've been the accused, caught in our failures, crushed by shame, certain that our worst mistakes will define us forever. And sometimes we've had the courage to be like Jesus, standing with the condemned when everyone else stands against them, offering truth with mercy, creating space for transformation rather than destruction. Some of you watching right now feel exactly like that woman, exposed, ashamed, surrounded by accusers, both external and internal. Maybe it's not adultery, but you carry something that feels just as heavy. I want you to hear these words as if Jesus himself is speaking them directly to you. Where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you? Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. This isn't cheap grace that pretends your choices don't matter. It's costly mercy that acknowledges the full reality of your situation while refusing to let it have the final word in your story. And for those holding stones, this story demands we drop them, not because sin doesn't matter, but because our own need for mercy should make us merciful. In our culture of call-out and cancellation, where one mistake can define a person forever, this ancient encounter offers a radical alternative. Not consequence-free living, but the possibility of redemption. Not freedom from truth, but truth that sets us free. Next time shame threatens to crush you, remember, there stands one who sees everything about you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and still says, neither do I condemn you. And next time outrage tempts you to pick up stones, remember, we all live in glass houses. We all need mercy more than justice. This is the revolutionary heart of faith. Not that sin doesn't matter, but that grace matters more. Not that truth can be ignored, but that truth is meant to heal, not destroy. If this message spoke to you today, please like this video and subscribe to Hidden Heroes of Faith for more stories that bring ancient truth to modern life. And also share with someone that might think he or she is condemned or that might be holding a stone. Remember, your worst moment doesn't have to be your last chapter. There is always another page waiting to be written. There is always grace strong enough to overcome shame,